Brazilian media is reporting that Jason Miller has been detained pending his testimony in an ongoing investigation. Miller is a former senior advisor to President Donald Trump and the CEO of Getter, a social media platform. Now, Miller was in Brazil meeting with the Bolsonaros, the many political figures, and he's being investigated under something having to do with anti-democratic acts in Brazil. Now, this is a breaking news story, so we'll go through the details to the best of our abilities, considering it's all in Portuguese and we're trying to translate it. But this news is breaking now in the United States, but Brazilian media reporting. I will ask you something. What do you think the reaction is from American media personalities? I'm sure you can guess. They're celebrating this. And beyond this breaking story, I think it plays into a story I had already actually been preparing, that we are headed for some kind of civil war. Yeah, I know it's perhaps cliche for Tim Pool to say it, but the response from many people in media is celebrating, saying they want to see him in a Brazilian prison. Now think about this for 2 seconds. An American has been detained in a foreign country. He was meeting with political figures. Normally, everyone in this country would be outraged. Yet now we can see the tribal conflict, the culture war cuts deep enough for some people to come out on Twitter and say, let him rot in a foreign prison. This is Jason Miller. He was an advisor to President Trump, the previous administration, not even that long ago. And now we are getting people actively celebrating this stuff. Already, we can see. And we got bad stuff happening. Now, we'll get into this, but I want to preface this first by saying I was actually preparing a larger segment on the civil conflict in this country. Some reports that had come out, some op-eds when this happened. And surprise, surprise, there's, people like Rick Wilson saying, who's dreaming of seeing this man in a Brazilian prison? Not me. Not for any American. They come here and face trial for crimes they did here, not some dubious political investigation in a foreign country. But I think we are absolutely seeing a serious fracture in this country. We've got a story out of Portland that they're going to be blocking trade. We've got, California, we already know this, that they've banned state travel to certain places. And many industries saying they're boycotting certain states over their laws. The breakdown is happening before your eyes. It won't just be instantaneous. Recently, I appeared on Russell Brand's podcast. Russell Brand's a good dude. I'm a fan. He's a smart fella. He asked me some really great questions. And he brought up my bringing up of civil war. And I think there's some very important things that I want to say in this capacity as we get into the details of what's going on with these stories we're seeing. People like to come to me and say, Tim, you said there was going to be a civil war, or you said you think civil war is likely. What's happening? I don't see one. You don't. You don't see people in a shootout in Portland. You don't see Trump supporters storming into the Capitol building, shutting down the Electoral College formalization of votes. You don't see people cheering for an American citizen being arrested in a foreign country. I mean, we just had a shootout in Portland. You don't see the ongoing conflict between political factions in the streets with Antifa and Proud Boys. They're fighting each other almost endlessly. It's been worse, no doubt, but it keeps happening. You don't see the states cutting themselves off from other states. You don't see Texas defying Joe Biden. I mean, how are you not paying attention? Oh, I'm sorry. You're a frog sitting in a pot and the temperature is getting too high. But because it's happening so slowly, you don't notice the change. And there it is. I'm not saying there's going to be a new Mason-Dixon line. I'm not saying you're going to see people marching from one state to another. I'm saying that the country is falling apart. And boy, do we have stories to back that up. Now, I could already point out January 6th. The left screams it was an insurrection. Okay. Well, they're right now complaining about a story in the AP about Robert E. Lee saying he was an insurrectionist. Sure. So is that to imply that those on the left who are telling me I'm wrong are implying that we are in the midst of some kind of escalating civil war? How many left and right-wing scholars need to say cold civil war before people start saying, wow, something's happening in this country? And how many states need to start separating themselves from other states before people start saying, maybe something serious is afoot? Here's the story from metropoles.com. This is Brazilian media, Google translated, so bear with me. They say PF holds former right arm of Trump in Brasilia for testimony. The federal police detained the businessman and former right-hand man of Trump, Jason Miller, Tuesday morning at Brasilia International Airport. According to the column, he was detained in the area reserved for private flights when he was about to board a private jet back to the U.S. Miller was detained to testify to the PF under Investigation 4874, which investigates the organization of anti-democratic acts in Brazil. The order came from Minister Alexandre de Moraes, rapporteur of the investigation at STF. The businessman is the founder of Getter, created to take Trump back to social media after the former president was banned. Getter has 2 million followers, of which 13.5 are from Brazil. Miller was in Brazil to participate in the Conservative Political Action Conference. In Brasilia, he met with President Jair Bolsonaro, Deputy Eduardo Bolsonaro, and former Chancellor Ernesto Araújo. Sorry, I'm not can't speak Portuguese all that well. Of course. Let me just point out, Jason Miller identifies himself as the CEO of Getter, former senior advisor, President Donald Trump, and a contributor at Newsmax. And they're celebrating. First, let me show you just some reactions. Southpaw says a report in Brazilian media says Trump advisor and deadbeat dad Jason Miller was detained in Brasilia this morning by federal police before boarding a private jet back to the U.S., citing the same website. He says Miller says he was released after 3 hours of questioning. So that's good news. He said, this afternoon, my traveling party was questioned for 3 hours at the airport in Brasilia after having attended this weekend's CPAC Brazil conference. We were not accused of any wrongdoing and told only that they wanted to talk. We informed them that we had nothing to say and were eventually released to fly back to the U.S. Our goal of sharing free speech around the world continues, Jason Miller, CEO of Getter. Now, that's from Annie Carney, who is a White House correspondent for the New York Times, saying that's the statement from Miller. Glad to hear he's okay. But of course, I wonder why this individual Southpaw would call him a deadbeat dad with hundreds of thousands of followers. How about this one? Shady Jason Miller has been detained by Brazilian authorities. And this person, AJ Delgado, is a lawyer at Harvard Law, blue check on Twitter. And then we have Rick Wilson. I mean, who among us hasn't thought about Jason Miller in a Brazilian prison? I don't understand. Why would we assume he'd be in a Brazilian prison? How is this a good thing in any way that an American citizen was detained by a foreign country for questioning? Yeah. You know, Rick Wilson's not particularly a leftist, although some people claim, I guess they'll just say he is because he's neocon turned pro-Democrat or whatever. The Lincoln Project now just overtly pro-Democrat. But I remember when the left was all against citizens being detained by foreign governments and warrantless spying and all that stuff. But here we are. We have one other person saying, if you don't think that January 6th was organized and coordinated, look what happened. An attempted, insurrection coordinated by Jason Miller, Steve Bannon, Don Jr. This is an international crime syndicate. Look at what's happening in Brazil right now. And there it is. They're cheering for it because they're blaming the insurrection on Miller, Bannon, and Don Jr., saying they're an international crime syndicate. The country's falling apart, my friends. It's that simple. I don't care if you believe me. I honestly don't. When these 20-year-old lefties go on YouTube and say, Tim Pool's so dumb for thinking this, I literally could not care less. I don't care. I got out of the cities. Actually, it was a smart move because we had that bad storm. But, that's an aside. The hurricane that swept through hit the East Coast really, really bad. No. I got out of the cities. I got away from this stuff. And you know what? I'm not saying we're all safe. I'm not saying I'm more likely to survive in the wilderness than somebody else. Well, actually, to a certain degree, yes. I'm just saying I'm doing what I have to do to prepare for two eventualities, potential eventualities. One, everything's fine. Nothing falls apart and I was wrong the whole time. Or one, I was right. Maybe there's a little bit of both, but ultimately the country is either falling apart very slowly or it's just in a tumultuous period and will recover. Either way, I'm living as though either could be true. That is to say, I got out of the cities. We set up a production studio and office far away, relatively close enough to an airport where we get to have a city's just nearby, about an hour from DC, not even that far. It's an hour. We're effectively in the suburbs, I guess, but an hour is kind of far. If this was Chicago, St. Charles or whatever, or Geneva, if you're familiar with the Chicagoland area, they say that's a suburb and it's like an hour out. So we're about an hour away. We're not too far. because maybe I'm wrong. I don't make moves off of these. Look, people call me the milquetoast fencer. I'm not definitively saying the end is nigh, the sky is falling. I'm saying all of these things are happening that, to me, make it seem like it's all falling apart. With this story, for instance, and I got a couple more for you. Portland to cut trade and travel with Texas amid abortion law outrage. Remember when I was saying that these states are going to start ripping themselves apart from the union? Remember when I was talking about how 37.2% of this country wants their regional area to secede from the union? That's right. In last year's election, it was John Podesta, according to the Boston Globe, who recommended the West Coast secede from the union should Donald Trump win. And you know what? I think the plurality is Democrats who want to secede in that region. Something like 47% of West Coast Democrats want to secede from the United States. Okay. I wonder if you were to just do California, take out Oregon and Washington and Alaska or whatever, see what you get. I think the number would go up quite substantially. Many states don't want to be a part of the union anymore. And now they're starting to pass what, in my opinion, is probably a violation of the 14th Amendment or, somewhere in the Constitution. That when these states start, one of the purposes of the Constitution was to normalize kind of behaviors and norms and laws and stuff between these different states. It's all falling apart, my friends. The New York Post reports, the city of Portland announced it intends to ban trade and travel to the state of Texas in response to the state's new abortion law. Mayor Wheeler announced on Friday that the city council intends to vote on an emergency resolution on Wednesday to stop the city's future procurement of goods and services from and city employee business travel to the state of Texas. The resolution will be in effect until the state of Texas ends the law or it is overturned. It is not exactly clear what such a ban would look like. City Legal Counsel is currently evaluating the legal aspects of the proposed resolution. The Portland City Council stands unified in its belief that all people should have the right to choose if and when they carry a pregnancy, and that the decision they make are complex, difficult, and unique to the circumstances. Well, I can agree with a large portion of that, but I can't agree with the lies. And the lies that you'll see right now on Reddit, because this is shockingly insane. There's one viral tweet among uninformed, ignorant individuals who just blindly march with the crowd while claiming they're the enlightened ones. It was a viral tweet saying, bounty hunters will start to emerge in Texas because anyone can sue anyone who got an abortion, and they'll be targeting 13-year-olds who were abused, who are trying to abort their babies, which would probably kill them. Of course, that's all a lie, because there's numerous exemptions in that claim. A 13-year-old who is forced by someone into carrying a pregnancy is exempt under the law. There's 6 weeks of no questions asked abortion for women, and then after that, you have to fall under certain exemptions. But they lie. That's what they do. Because when you talk about what the law actually does, there might be some arguments from honest liberals about time frame. But I think the law was cleverly crafted to address these questions and these concerns. Medical issues, force, incest, and government force, coercion. And so they said, okay, we'll line it all up and make something, 6 weeks for no reason. And beyond that, exceptions only. Well, they say that's not the case. And I don't want to get too much into that because this is more about how the states are falling apart. They say the new law, SB 8, was signed by Governor Greg Abbott in May and went into effect last week after the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. It bans all abortions once a fetal heartbeat can be detected, which is typically about 6 weeks after conception and before most women were aware they are pregnant. Additionally and uniquely, the law allows for private residents to bring legal action against anyone who assisted in terminating the pregnancy, including those who drive a woman to the abortion appointment. Citizens who win such lawsuits may be entitled to at least $10,000. All right. If you live in Texas and you don't like this, there's the door. You can go anywhere you want. No one's stopping you. If you live in New York, you don't like the vaccine mandate, hey, there's the door. You can leave. No one's stopping you. Now, I still think that there's got to be limits, and I don't like the idea of government intervention in medical practices. There's a difference between New York and Texas, though. In Texas, they're mandating you get a medical procedure, or you can't participate in public accommodation. Wrong. In Texas, they're barring women from getting a medical procedure that would terminate the life of the baby. And that's an entirely different argument. The left simply, their way around this is to say the fetus is not alive, which is why I said the bill in Texas was cleverly crafted, a heartbeat detected. If the heartbeat does not determine when something is a life form, then when is it? And there's no consensus among the left. They just want to be able to terminate for any reason at any point. Sure, that's pro-abortion, not pro-choice, I suppose. Well, they are different. They are different. Because in Texas, it involves 2 different lives. In New York, it involves 1. Regardless, I have a personal moral conundrum with where the government intervenes in me talking with my doctor about what I'm supposed to be doing. So, vaccine mandates out. But I'll tell you right now, as Texas says no, and New York says yes to these mandates, Florida says no, and Washington and Oregon are apparently, ramping up for vaccine mandates. You can see how divided this country is and how we will get to the point where there's going to be no interaction. Let me explain. Let's say you're a truck driver, and those are in short supply right now, and they say, yo, we got a big haul. It's going into New York. It's, toilet paper. And the driver is going to go, I can't go to New York. I don't got the vaccine. And they're going to say, well, get it. And be like, I talked to my doctor. My doctor advised against it for certain medical reasons. All right, well, you can't go. Yeah, it's too bad. How many people are just going to say, no, I don't care. Shut up. I'll do what I want. I'm not getting it. Well, this shipment's going to Texas. Can't go. Won't let me use any public accommodations. Can't get food. Not interested. Someone else can do it. So now because of that, people from states that don't have the mandates are less likely to go to states that do. And now with like Portland and these other similar instances, you're going to see less travel from blue states into red states. This is back in June. California banned state travel to Florida and 4 other states. And this is over laws that discriminate against the LGBT community. Make no mistake, we're in the midst of an unprecedented wave of bigotry and discrimination in this country. California is not going to support it. Lawmakers in 2016 banned non-essential travel to states with laws that discriminate against LGBTQ people. The 12 other states on the list are Texas, Alabama, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. That's a lot of places. It's a lot of places, isn't it? All right, well, that's state travel, right? Sure. I think we are watching the collapse, and people expect there to be a declaration, grandstanding on a stage, and thousands of people lining up as Donald Trump says, no, we've had enough, and we won't take it anymore. The Republic of Texas is out, and the new Confederacy has risen. It's not going to happen. That's just not what a civil war is. You see, in America, we had a civil war, so they call it. But a civil war is typically defined as different factions fighting for control of one government. I mean, that kind of happens every 4 years, 2 to 4 years, to be honest. Or every 2 years, I guess you could just say, depending. Well, what we're talking about now is a civil war in the truest sense of the word, meaning if you look at the history of civil war in other countries, factions rise up, fight each other, and they want a capital. In the American Civil War as we know it, you had states just breaking away and saying, leave me alone. It's very different. So that's why you have the people on the South saying it's the war of northern aggression. Well, it was Abraham Lincoln trying to keep the Union together, and I actually think Ulysses S. Grant made the best argument as to why the Union should have stayed together. One, slavery is wrong. It always has been wrong. And it took technology and enlightenment to finally put an end to the violation of human rights and to such an important degree. But Ulysses S. Grant said, from a practical standpoint, we sacrificed blood and treasure to admit you to the Union, and you owe that debt which can never be repaid. So no, you don't just get to leave the Union. But it wasn't a civil war. It was essentially a rebellion, I guess. Look at it this way. We had an agreed upon law in this country. You go to Congress, you state your case, your reps go, they vote, and boom, there you go. Unhappy with it? Well, that's the system. What happened? The South was like, yo, we don't like these laws they're pushing, so we out. And they're like, dude, we agree to the rules. You agree to the rules. You lost the argument. Shut up. And they fought. It's not the same. All right. Now, the Confederates did want to take D.C. They did want to take I think it was D.C. at the time. They wanted to take the capital to make a statement. But they didn't want the United States. They wanted to leave because they had their own states. It's different. What we're seeing now is it's like a giant pyramid, one by one, with the blocks being pulled out from underneath it. Sure, People standing at the top of that pyramid are like, what are you talking about? Nothing's happening. I've been sitting up here the whole time. But then eventually things start rumbling. And for some people watching the news, you see it happen. You see the gunfight, which happened a couple of weeks ago. There's literally a gunfight that broke out in Portland. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. We just saw a Proud Boy get shot in the foot at another one of these clashes. I think it was up in Portland. Shootouts are happening. People are getting shot and killed. But you know what happens is people live in the now. And when they read history, you got 5 years of Civil War condensed into a few pages on Wikipedia or something, and they read it and they think it was quick. The American Revolution took 20 years. There was conflict for 20 years. 20. There were people who were born when there was already independent sentiment, and they died fighting for it. Now, isn't that something crazy? Being born into a country where they're telling you we should be independent, we're being oppressed, then fighting and dying. Because that's how long it took. Right now, we are seeing culture war causing, as a symptom of, we are seeing lies and manipulation in the media. We are seeing people saying enough. We're seeing people drop off altogether and say they don't care about the system anymore. I think things are getting bad. But I got to tell you, the story about Jason Miller is where it gets particularly freaky because it shows you how far they're willing to go to get what they want. They would love it. If every single Trump voter was rounded up, no joke. What do you think would happen if the government came out and started saying we're going to start rounding up the unvaccinated? They'd be cheering for it. What do you think would happen if the government came up and said these are fascists, we got to arrest them? They would be cheering for it. Pay attention. It'll happen. But again, don't even try me on this stuff. Because I've had numerous people come to me and say, Tim, you said a civil war was going to happen. Well, what's going on? And I'm just like, bro got shot last weekend. Like, what are you talking about? Dude got shot in the chest a year ago now? I think it was just shy of a year ago. Dude got shot twice and killed in Portland. We've seen clashes, billions of dollars in damage, rioting. We're seeing people threatened with arrest in Congress. We got the January 6th Commission trying to get records of congressmen and women's phone details and stuff. We saw an American journalist have his phone records published, leaked by a member of Congress. Yo, if you think this is normal and we're not headed for some kind of kinetic chaos, you are not paying attention. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.